This podcast is made possible in part by the generous contribution of our Smart Insiders Plus members. If you're not a member, join in now. Just go to smartrecovery.org/insiders.
Hello, and welcome to the Smart Recovery Podcast. I'm your host, Luke Frazier. Today on the program, we welcome Alicia Renegar. She is a certified addiction peer recovery coach and smart facilitator in Columbus, Indiana, and a proud member of the LGBTQIA community. Alicia Renegar, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Luke. Thank you for having me.
So I want to start with some of your personal story. If you could tell me, just take me through the kind of, I knew you grew up in a rural area, and tell me a little bit about how you ended up in a position where you had some substance use disorders.
Yeah, absolutely. I grew up in Shelbyville, Indiana. It's a small, very small rural town. And my experience growing up from childhood up to even the present really was a tough beginning, I guess you could say. Even through education wise, the school was very hard on anyone who was different. Be that if you were Asian, if you were Black, I mean, the discrimination in a small town like that was ready and able.
Yeah, it's kind of like the other, whatever kind of other it was, it would be seen or frowned upon.
Yeah, absolutely. And it seemed like when I was from even middle school is really when it started. Was my principal would follow me around, and it was just very odd. And being so young, I really didn't understand really what it was. I thought I was doing something wrong, but in realization, I was just being myself. And in my school, I really was the only one that was out, proudly gay. Chopped my hair off in sophomore year, because I just didn't care. But the pushback I got and the rhetoric that I got from the community as a whole.
What do you mean rhetoric? The kinds of, was there name calling or?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I played a lot of basketball. I was an athlete, and my teammates would call me specific names that were, they were just very, very bad. I don't know if I can say them on here or not. So, but
well, that's really up to you. I mean, I can assume they were hurtful and intolerant.
Yeah, they were. They would say they would call me a dyke or lesbo, things that were just ignorant. And there's so many stigmas attached to being from the gay community, being lesbian, gay, transgender, any of that. And growing up in a small town, my parents thought it was the best idea at the time. But really, when I started experiencing those big issues and those factors that were attached to it, is when I chopped my hair off because I was getting bullied so much. And bullying is a huge, huge problem with anybody from the LGBTQ community, because it just seems like it never stops. And back then, we didn't have, classrooms or clubs in schools that had things to prevent that, or, kind of like that buddy system, or the zero tolerance.
Yeah. You would think that leadership, administrative leadership, you said that your principal actually followed you around, but it's just it's so disappointing that leadership, those adults who are setting the tone for the school and for the students, wouldn't Absolutely. Be assertively making sure that there wasn't that kind of bullying going on.
Right. And I absolutely agree. And that's what I thought. And at the time, like I said, when I told my parents, the vice principal is following me around, and I have no idea why, but I started to get a very good idea I think around my sophomore year, like I said. And it was just left and right criticism and discrimination. And teachers didn't stop it from happening. Sometimes there would be police escorts with my vice principal. And I mean, I even was, it was just so terrible to have to put up with. And it was all through childhood.
Yeah. Let me, I'm not sure I understand that. The police escort with the vice principal, meaning they also walked around the school?
Yes. I guess the only thing I could get out of that was the vice principal. She did not like me. She did not like what I represented as a person. She did not like the fact that I was openly gay, and I didn't care who knew. You know, I wanted people to know who I am and who I was then and until now. But the police following them with her, I guess, was a scare tactic to me.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say, and neither of us are psychologists per se, but it seems like there's some kind of deeply rooted fear, some kind of fear of something. I'm actually not sure of the difference, fear of the difference, fear of how it might threaten, quote unquote, other students. Is that really where you see it coming from, or what's your take on that?
I would have to say, there's a lot of reasons, I believe, to a person. I think it stems from their families and how they grew up and what they were taught and what their parents believe, of course. We all remember what our parents tell us growing up. So, but what I think it really stems from is fear, fear of people being different, and the fact that people don't like change. People don't, and a lot of people that disagree don't want change. They want things to stay the way they are. And that's why civil rights and equality just is such a hard thing to fight for and to get to, it's a constant fight.
Yeah. I'm sorry. I think that's an excellent point, Alicia. The idea of change, and we resist change as human beings, and and even those of us in recovery. Sometimes we also have difficult time with change. I don't know if it's more or less than people who aren't in recovery, but definitely I've learned that people in my community, meeting the recovery community, do have a lot of trouble with change.
Yeah. And in the recovery community, I've learned very quickly. I worked with Eric. I worked with Eric Moss from Recovery Centers of America up in Indianapolis, here in Indiana. And he, from their website, we talked, and he said, I really want you to strive. You're going to be a fantastic addiction counselor one day. And when he told me that, I mean, he was just a stranger. I had no idea who he was, and I didn't know why this person believed in me so much, especially Nathan Walsh, that he was working at ASAP Hub, where that's where I found myself and wanted to work in this field. But in the recovery community and with substance abuse, the thing that we don't talk about enough is the fact that over more than half of the people of overdoses and overdose deaths are caused by predispositions from people from the LGBTQIA community. And that's something that I don't see pamphlets for. I don't see programs for. And over half of the overdose deaths last year, I believe, were from overdose deaths from people who were abusing drugs because of the fact that they were self-medicating from the pain they were going through, either from getting, shunned from their families, thrown out, living on the streets as youths, young, teenagers, and having to deal with something like that, or, by yourself, is a huge mental It's mental anguish.
It's stress. Yeah, it's stress.
Yeah.
It's turning some of that stress inward. Can lead to mental health issues, depression, and other kinds of conditions. But before we get into more about your professional background and how you were led to the great work that you're doing now, I want to go back just to that growing up area, and again, ask you when you talked about being gay to your parents, say, or when you became out. I don't know if that's a acceptable term anymore, but I the idea of becoming openly gay. What caused you, or how did you give yourself permission to do so?
That's a great that's a great question. I never gave myself permission. I just did, I guess, in so many words. And now that I think of it and remembering that, because it's always been such a great experience for me, because I always take painful experiences and make them into something that makes me stronger in the long run, in the present. And when I was growing up and I realized I was gay at a very young age, probably about 6 years old. I knew I was, and I was a tomboy. My parents were, they're not religious. So not saying that religion, has anything to do with it, but they didn't care. They were very supportive. They never said anything that was discriminatory. They never said anything that would make me feel uncomfortable. They were very supportive, and I'm very lucky for that, because without that support, you don't have a stable foundation
from which to become open and honest and become
Absolutely.
yourself. I mean, but the journey to becoming yourself is for human beings is tough enough, and when you have, again, that identification with an other group, or as defined by society, an other group, then it might be even more difficult or even more stressful. So when you left high school, what happened next?
When I left high school, after that, I was still playing a little bit of AAU. Actually, I was, what happened in high school was actually pretty disturbing, because I was in my junior year. I would have graduated in 2005. And my vice principal was the one who called a meeting with the superintendent and my mother and the rest of the school board. And they basically told me that I couldn't go there anymore, that I basically wasn't wanted. I, dressed differently. My mom dressed me up, I guess you could say, not how I would dress in school, more professionally.
Okay.
And just basically when I left high school, it was because they kicked me out.
Wow.
Yeah,
I just that level of intolerance, I'm sorry, that's just astounding to me. I can't believe it would be so obvious.
Yeah, it was incredibly obvious. And my vice principal even said to the superintendent, she doesn't ever dress like that here in school. It was almost like it was this secretive, covert mission for her to get me kicked out of school because of the fact I was gay. She never said it, of course, but I knew well enough, and so did my mom, and so did my dad. So it was leading to a lot of things it was already a very traumatic experience.
Yeah.
To that time.
Yeah. You're listening to Alicia Renegar. She is a certified addiction peer recovery coach and a smart facilitator in Columbus, Indiana. Well, let's move on to how you discovered SMART. What happened, or actually, we haven't gotten to the point where you needed a recovery program of sorts. So take me to that point.
Yes. It was about several years ago. I hadn't thought about all the trauma, even though, because with traumatic experiences, I kind of pushed it back. You push it back, way back in your brain, and you don't think about it, and you don't realize it's the reason that you start using. But several years ago, I started using pain pills, of course, hydrocodone, oxycodone, and then that led to heroin abuse, and I was addicted and just doing the most horrible things to my parents, stealing, that cycle of insanity. And it was just killing me. I legally died 3 times.
Oh boy, I'm glad it didn't turn into the tragedy.
Yeah, me too. And the thing that I have to tell myself is all the trauma I've caused my family as well, because the first time I overdosed, it was actually my basement of my mom's house. And if it wasn't for her, she found me, and I created that experience for my mother. And sometimes I hate myself for it, but I can't do that. But at the same time, it made me realize I can never do something like that. And so really all those traumatic experiences that I went through in life, especially, it just seemed like it was one bad thing after another growing up, but I was free and I never had to hide anything. But it led to the drug abuse. Absolutely. All the pent up anger, the teen angst that I never got to talk to anybody about it. It was all kept inside. I just didn't speak of it. And when I was abusing drugs, I was just hardcore every day, and it led to so many issues and so many problems I got to this point where I thought, I'm never going to be able to stop doing this. And then when I started, the last time that I overdosed, I went straight to jail, and thank God for Narcan. And I went to jail, and I was there for about 3 months, and something just clicked, and I started volunteering at ASAP Hub and volunteering there and getting to know everyone that I worked with, my coworkers. It was just, and then it was just something that, when you kind of don't know that something's going to happen and it changes your life forever. That's how it was for me. It was something clicked, and I'm like, this is what I want to do. I want to help people. Every single person that walked in and needed help, I know it's kind of that selfish feeling of helping people. You get that satisfaction, but I just love helping people.
Yeah.
And
Well, I think it's both things, isn't it? I mean, you're helping others, but
right.
in the same time, at the same time, you're helping yourself, which, if you're not healthy, if you're not, in touch with those feelings that you mentioned you had stuffed for years, and, like a volcano, they erupted, because you can't keep that kind of pressure to keep things like that down and stuffed
Right.
inside. But yeah, there you were, and you had a real desire to help others, and it did help you, but I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
Yeah. And that's such a good point, because I had to tell myself that over and over again, at the beginning of my recovery, which, wasn't easy, and it never will be. But I did try my best, and I got there. And the most important thing I want to share with people is, I know that feeling of when you're starting recovery, or even if you're in active abuse, drug abuse, you feel like you have that despair of, I'm never going to get out of this. I'm never going to feel better. Even if I try, what's the point? Because I have a criminal record, I have felonies. I'm never going to be able to get a job. All these things are just raining down on you, and they're all these negative thoughts. But at the same time, I made it. So many people make it to recovery because we work hard at it. And with the proper support, I felt the same way too. And I got to where I am today. And that's why I want to help people realize that they can do it. I want to help them get to that point, because they can.
Well, that's a positive outlook, and that's so important for those who are, trying to make the decision and taking steps toward recovery, or, in their minds, making a change talked about earlier that change can be difficult. But was it around this time that you discovered Smart Recovery?
Yes. I was working at ASAP, and they were basically paying for our education to be smart facilitators. It was smart facilitator training. And Kevin Minnick, I love that guy.
Oh, wait, Kevin's been a guest on the program. He's a wonderful, excellent person. Yep.
Absolutely. And we were honored to have him as our instructor. And he was just one of the most influential people to have, teaching you anything really. And me and some of my coworkers were taking the classes, and just all through it, he was just right on point with so many things that I agreed with. And he said, I want you guys to really get out there. He said, you guys live in a small town. I want you guys to get out there, do more meetings. These are the things that need to be done. There was a whole list of them, but it was just so motivational. And, Kevin just always gave it to you straight. And the SMART program has so many things, the evidence, the science and evidence-based programs, and everything in the SMART recovery program has even shown me, especially as somebody in recovery, things that just make so much more sense to me than, not to down other meetings at all, because that's one of our sayings in SMART recovery: whatever works for you works. And I 100% agree with that. But the SMART program has just so many programs, I wish, and so many pathways and, things that make sense to me as a person that was in active addiction. If I had known about SMART, I would have had a higher success. Maybe I wouldn't have overdosed so many times because I didn't know anything about it. And, it just really spoke to me. Everything, the programs just worked so well. Yeah. And people here in Columbus are coming to the meetings. I think it was like 10, and then now it's like 100, I think. So
that's
it's catching on very quickly. Yes.
Well, I mean, you're talking about multiple pathways. SMART recovery is so appealing to many people. It's practical. It challenges our way of thinking. It's self-empowering. We just have lots of differences from 12-step programs or other kinds of recovery. And if that's what works for people, that's what's important. That's what's important. And let's say they use it in conjunction with other pathways. That's fine too. I mean, it doesn't have to be exclusive.
Absolutely.
SMART is non-stigmatizing. It's welcoming. Wherever you are in your journey, and in your active use, or maybe you're not actively using, but you're afraid that you'll go back to using. Whatever it may be, SMART is welcoming, and that's what's important. And the other thing, and you probably see this as a facilitator, is I might attend a SMART meeting and I have an alcohol use disorder. I might be sitting next to someone with a gambling problem, or someone with other compulsive behavior, or an opioid use disorder. And the focus is on the behavior, not on the identity of being quote unquote an alcoholic or something like that. So do you think that's one of the reasons that SMART seems to work for people?
Absolutely, I do. Because we don't, in SMART, we give the voice to the person in recovery. And they're in SMART, we don't identify people as different. And we don't segregate any kind of addiction. It's really, we're going to treat you all the same. We're going to work with you all the same. And we give the voice to the person in recovery. And that's so much different than people that have, or meetings that I've been to, where they're just talking to us. And I didn't feel any empowerment or motivation from that. But in SMART recovery and those meetings that I've attended and hosted, it makes such a huge difference to give people their voice, because they have things they want to say, but sometimes they just don't feel comfortable enough to share that.
That's Alicia Renegar. Excuse me. That's Alicia Renegar. She is a certified smart recovery facilitator in Columbus, Indiana. We've been talking about some of her personal journey and growing up and being openly gay and having the kinds of responses and reactions that were intolerant and really unpleasant. I mean, more than unpleasant. That's too nice of a word. I imagine it just got so brutal, and the kinds of things you had to face, things you had to hear. And then your journey to recovery, your journey of discovering smart recovery and becoming a certified addiction peer recovery coach. Tell me a little bit more about that. Where did you become certified, or how did you become certified?
I became certified. It was online through CCAR and MHAI and with ICATA. And it was through a program that ASAP was running. They were needing certified addiction peer recovery coaches, and they're funding it. And I absolutely wanted to be a certified addiction peer recovery counselor, or coach. I'm working at being a counselor. But yeah, it was a wonderful program, and I was lucky enough to have Justin Beatty as one of my instructors with Phil Stuckey. And they were he went through online because of the pandemic. It was just amazing, and it felt different from my college classes I had taken online, because the just the resourcefulness and how they spoke to you from their experience, just it spoke volumes. And when after that, it was, I just absolutely was like, what can I do next? What can I do next? Because the motivation was just that even created more of the motivation that I want to, be more and help more. I just fell in love with helping and fell in love with becoming certified. And when I went to take the test, I was so nervous, but I passed, and it was the proudest moment of my life at that point, because I wandered through life. I became a chef. I went to college to be a chef, and then for a paralegal for a little while. And I just never knew what I wanted to be. And as a late bloomer, 36 years old, I finally found what I wanted to do, and becoming a certified addiction peer recovery coach.
That's fantastic. That's just fantastic. What a great way of and you know what? Journeys are sometimes meandering, and you've brought your experiences, whatever they've been, to where you are right now. And that enthusiasm is so important. It's infectious, and that's where I love hearing you, talking about it, because sometimes people get in positions and maybe they're not so enthusiastic anymore. So it's great to hear the kinds of things you're saying.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
Let's go into more specifically about the meetings that you facilitate. Do you facilitate exclusively LGBTQ meetings, or is there such a thing in Columbus, Indiana?
Well, yes. I'm starting it. I finally found locations, and I've hosted a few, and it was very hard starting the first ever smart LGBTQ plus smart, recovery meeting. It's the first one that we've had in Columbus. Kevin was actually the one. I said, I want to start one. I want to start one of these meetings specifically for the gay community. Yes. Because I know, as someone that has experienced this, that the predispositions and experiences can lead to so much drug abuse, and it's not talked about enough. It's not discussed enough. So I wanted to create that platform, of course, with SMART, in a small town like Columbus that is open enough to let me host that meeting. And I found two great churches that let me do that. And I do really want it to be specifically for the gay community because I got pushback a lot of times. It was very hard to establish and get a location. It was hard to do. But I didn't give up. I'm like, I already knew this. I knew I was expecting this. But yes, I mean, I don't, in the meeting lists and online, it is specifically for LGBTQ people from the community, but anybody that wants to come, I don't discriminate against that either. If they want to come, they're more than welcome to come because it is recovery.
Right. And it's recovery of all kinds, with all kinds of people. But, it does have, I think, probably a special appeal to members of the gay community because they know that they can talk about anything to do with their experience and what has risen up from their experience, perhaps trauma, such as yourself went through. And, and again, burying that stuff is not a good idea because it's going to come out in other ways. I mean, that's just, I think you can count on that.
Yeah, that's 100% true and honest. That's a fact.
Okay. Let's switch topics to treatment facilities themselves. What's your experience with treatment facilities and their programming for LGBTQ plus members of that community?
Through my experience and through my research and the data I've looked at online and just research period, really the only treatment facilities even working with them for clients, most of them don't have specific programs or therapy for people and youths or adults that is specifically for the LGBTQ plus community. It's there, and there should be, except for RCA, that was the first program that I saw that had a whole team of people for therapy and, just specialized programs for anyone that identified. And I was like, wow, this is amazing because the potential for that should be everywhere. And that experience is not anything I ever saw. It was just, you need to go through detox, you need to go through this and that, but there needs to be specific oriented programs because nobody's the same. And we all have to find our own path to recovery. And when it comes to being gay or transgender, or, it's just so important in treatment facilities to have that option, because feeling uncomfortable is, you're already feeling very uncomfortable. Withdrawal, detoxing is just, it's horrible. So in treatment facilities, I don't find a lot of that. I don't see a lot of that. And I'm hoping that'll change. And that's what I'm definitely going to fight for in my career. And I hope that we can, make that change. And I see that progress through some treatment facilities, which is absolutely wonderful. But at the same time, I think we should discuss it more, and we should come together more in the, addiction community and recovery community to make that option, more widespread.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned that people share a lot, but different communities, different affinity groups also share in different ways than, someone who is not specifically a member of that community. I mean, SMART has meetings for first responders and veterans, for instance,
Right.
And some of their experiences are such that others who aren't in that community, if you want to label them a community of first responders and veterans, wouldn't have those experiences.
Right. And that's why these, programs are so important, because I think we have there's that stigma attached, of course, of many to addiction and of course, even recovery, mm-hmm. that, we're all the same. We'll all recover the same. All the programs will work the same. And that's just, it's a farce. It's a myth. It's everyone's different, and it doesn't work for every single person the same way it will for another.
Yeah. Even the larger smart recovery program itself. We talked about multiple pathways. If there's multiple pathways and some work better than others, then why wouldn't it be multiple meetings where some work better than others?
Absolutely. And, SMART they represent that. They represent, and the biggest thing that attracted me to SMART was, and I think also to a lot of people I've spoken to in recovery that go to the SMART meetings, is the fact that you're not talking at them. They're learning all these ways and pathways to get, sober and finding themselves. It's not just all about recovery. It's about life skills. It's about what they can do, things that they've never been taught, employment, and not blaming yourself for everything that's happened. And that's what SMART represents. It represents giving the voice to the people in recovery. And that is so important.
Yeah, very, very well said, Alicia. Now, let me ask you this. Do you consider yourself an activist? Do you like that label?
I guess you could say I'm kind of like a introverted activist, which makes no sense.
Okay.
But I've spoken with members in the community, and I really am. Yeah, you could say I'm a big advocate, and I'm getting to activist because
it's a continuum. Is that
there's a certain level of real danger at the same time, and that's also something I wanted to discuss, is the fact that a lot of people don't know the dangers and fighting for the gay community. There's so many obstacles and so many things that people don't realize, and a lot of people do realize, and some are on the fence about it. But there's so much danger to, especially the youths in this country and in the world, that we don't ever talk about, we don't discuss, and people don't think to care about. And that's something that, we have to make that a discussion. We have to change that.
Yeah.
And
well, you've been able to talk about these things just today. I mean, you've been bringing up stuff that does need to be talked about more, and that's to your credit. And and thank you for that. I think it's wonderful. Oh, just to share, I have heard a term recently called ambivert. Have you ever heard that?
Ambivert.
It's for a person who is introverted, but also almost equally is extroverted. And I count myself in that category. I can be fine alone and read a book by myself, go for a walk in the woods. And then I can also get energy from being with other people and being in groups and having a good time with groups. So it sounds like if you're an introverted advocate or introverted activist, that it's the same kind of thing.
Yeah, I'm glad you gave me the knowledge of this, because I put myself in that category as well. Absolutely.
Alicia, it's been really wonderful to talk with you. Did you have anything else you wanted to share about smart recovery in Columbus, Indiana, or being a certified addiction peer recovery coach?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me. And this has been such a great experience. So I'm so blessed to be where I'm at right now, and so blessed to be on this program. And I guess the one last thing I want to share is anyone who needs to talk about it. Come to these smart recovery meetings, and don't afraid to be yourself, because you're perfect the way you are, and it matters to be yourself. Never hold it in. And if you need help, ask for it. Absolutely.
That's wonderful. And that's advice for everyone. In any kind of position, place in life, anything like that. So thank you very much. That's Alicia Renegar. She is a certified SMART facilitator in Columbus, Indiana. She's also a certified addiction peer recovery coach. It's been a wonderful conversation. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Until next time on the Smart Recovery Podcast, stay healthy and stay connected.